My son's fiancé mocked me when we met for the first time. Your dad only finished middle school. Seriously, can you even get a job with such low qualifications? She laughed heartily. Her father joined in. I can't believe he's an unemployed high school dropout. They belittled me, and to make things worse, they served food only for themselves, excluding me. The fiancé's mother said with a big smile, I prepare meals only for my family. I've never seen someone treated so badly during a meeting between two families. I decided to get back at the 5 rude people, including my son, and told them to say whatever they wanted before storming out of the restaurant. My name is Eric Roberts. I just turned 59 this year, and I have a 24-year-old son named Larry. But my relationship with my son is strained, and he never comes to my house. I've often regretted how I raised him, as this led to the situation we're in now. I lost my beloved wife when Larry was still in elementary school. My wife had been frail since childhood, and she passed away at the young age of 47. At my wife's funeral, I didn't care about the judgmental looks from relatives. I sobbed like a little kid. Larry was more composed, telling me, Dad, it's sad, but let's say our goodbyes to Mom. But my grief only lasted during the funeral. Back then, I was running a real estate business I had inherited from my father. The day after my wife's funeral, I woke up to phone calls from clients. That's right, I had loyal clients to take care of, and I had to raise Larry on my own. Those phone calls snapped me out of my grief, and I headed to my office. At the same time, I took part in school events and PTA meetings, filling the role my wife had played all by myself. There's no way my clumsy self could juggle work and school events perfectly on my own. I quickly gave up and decided to temporarily close my business. I handed over my clients to another real estate agency so I could spend time with Larry. But when I went to his school, Larry glared at me and said, Dad, I told you not to come. He even complained, don't tell anyone you're my dad. Without saying whose parent I was or why I was at the school, I would just be some stranger. Even today, I'm wearing a name tag that says Roberts as I participate in PTA activities. I couldn't understand why my son suddenly started giving me the cold shoulder, but it didn't take long for the truth to come out. Hey, isn't that your dad? What's he doing at school on a weekday? Does he have nothing better to do? One classmate said, My mom said that after your mom passed away, your dad became jobless, right? Larry remained silent and looked down as his classmates taunted him. I quickly rushed over and told them, I'm just taking some time off work. It's like your summer or winter break. But this only made things worse for Larry. Your dad's just pretending to be on break. Your family's poor. I'll share my bread from lunch with you, one kid said. Larry grew more and more resentful, and his classmates kept making fun of him. Despite knowing my son was being ridiculed, all I could do was look the other way. I can't remember how many times I cried alone because of how pathetic I felt. Soon, when Larry entered middle school, he started hanging out with delinquents. He would sleep over at friends' houses and hang out at gas station parking lots until late at night. Back in the day, cell phones weren't very common, and it was rare for a middle schooler to have one. Larry started coming home less and less, and I had no clue where he was or what he was doing. All I could do was apologize when I got calls from the school saying there had been a complaint from a nearby gas station. Whenever I went to Larry's school, Larry and his rowdy classmates would call me names like good for nothing and bottom of the barrel while throwing empty cans at me. Larry had become more violent since entering middle school, and I was scared to even talk to him, not knowing what he might do. I wish I had handled things better when he was still in elementary school, but what was the right way for a parent to deal with a child's bad behavior? I had no idea how to communicate with a teenager and was utterly confused. He skipped school without caring and even ran away during classes. His grades were rock bottom. At a parent-teacher conference, they told me about a private high school where even Larry could get in, and I was relieved. I was glad there was a high school he could go to, I thought maybe he'd calm down a bit after going to high school. Just as I hoped, after starting high school, Larry began to take his classes seriously. He studied hard, started scoring a bit above average on tests, and even made it to college. But his disdain for me remained the same. Even after going to high school, he continued to bounce from one friend's house to another, never stopping by home. After getting into college, he started living alone in a dorm and paid his tuition by working part-time. He was living independently, which was commendable, but he was cold as ice towards me. Even after he started working, he never once came home. Then, out of the blue, when Larry was about 24, he called me. He said, "I've got someone I want to marry." Then he goes, "Next Sunday at 3 p.m., we're meeting up at a fancy restaurant, so be there," and lets me know the plans he made without even asking about my availability. I was like, hold on, this is too sudden. But when I got mad, he just said, "If you can't make it, don't bother," and hung up the phone with his cold attitude. I had mixed feelings, but he's my only son, so for his sake, I went to the fancy restaurant at the time he told me to. When I got to the restaurant, her folks were already there, and they were like, "Who are you?" All rude. I was like, "You call me out of the blue, and then ask who I am? Come on." But even though I was fuming, her folks just said, "No, we didn't call you," and they were just as cold as my son. Now my son Larry was standing there smirking. This guy was up to something. Still not sure I trusted what was happening, I headed inside the restaurant. There was no talk about Larry or his partner Kelly. Instead, I was the center of their attention, and they treated me like an intruder. Then Larry started saying, "This guy here dropped out of high school and worked, but after Mom passed, he's just been loafing around, telling Kelly and her folks." I was like, "Hey, this isn't the time or place," but he didn't care. Then, to top it all off, Kelly burst out laughing, saying, "For real? Can a person even get hired with just a middle school education?" Kelly's dad added, "Wow, raised by a high school dropout and layabout, but you're here with a college degree and a job at a big company. You took your old man as what not to be, huh?" Praising Larry. I was too tired to argue and was about to say what you want, I'm out of here, but then a waiter came in from behind me with the food. "Sorry for the wait," he said. "Oh right, the food hadn't even come yet." I was so upset I forgot. I tried to calm down, thought I'd just eat what was in front of me and leave, but the food that got brought out was only for Larry, Kelly, and Kelly's parents. The waiter said, "I'm sorry, we had a reservation for 5, giving me this look." Kelly's mom said, "Yes, that's correct. He's not our family, so don't mind him," giving the waiter a sweet smile. The waiter looked all kinds of uncomfortable and backed out. Just as I was about to lose it, Kelly's dad cut me off. He said, "We don't want anything to do with some deadbeat high school dropout. Our family and relatives are all bank employees, doctors working at major companies. You don't belong here. Please leave." That was enough. I said, "Is education and job history all you care about? Aren't you folks a bit off your rockers?" and got up to leave. To that, Kelly's dad said, "I work at Bank of New York Mellon, where education and job history really matter for clients' trust." But of course, a layabout like you wouldn't know. I said, "Oh my, you work at Bank of New York Mellon, huh? That's quite impressive," and walked out. I said that as I was leaving, but they didn't hear me. The next day, I paid a visit to Bank of New York Mellon, where Kelly's dad works. Being called a deadbeat by my son, his classmates, and my son's fiancée and her family, I must admit, I'm not actually a deadbeat. After my wife passed away, I temporarily closed my real estate business. Let me clarify, it was just a temporary closure. I didn't shut it down for good. After my wife's passing, I switched my business to online management so I could prioritize my son's school events and PTA meetings. When I had a physical store, most of my clients were neighbors, but after switching to online management, I could serve customers from all over the country, like people living in small towns about an hour's drive from the nearest train station, and even Americans living abroad. I started getting more consultations about renting and buying properties from these folks. Thanks to the internet, I could expand my property portfolio and cater to a broader clientele. Running a real estate business online made things possible that seemed like a dream. Additionally, I was quite active in stocks and investments as a hobby. Currently, I have $70 million deposited in Bank of New York Mellon, where Kelly's dad works. Upon arriving at the bank, I promptly requested to speak with the branch manager and informed him about everything that happened the day before. I said, I was told by one of your employees that this bank operates on trust, built on educational background and work history. So I've lost all trust in this bank because of that statement. Could you please proceed with the account closure? The branch manager kept apologizing profusely and finally explained the account closure process with a face on the verge of tears. Oh, I almost forgot about something important. There's this troublemaker who has not paid the rent for the apartment I own for 3 years. I had been letting it slide, thinking he's my son, but no more. I mailed my son a notice demanding 3 years' worth of rent. 5 days later, Kelly's dad and my bonehead son came storming into my house. Why did you rat me out to the branch manager? That was underhanded, Dad. What's the deal with that notice? If you're the manager, cover for me. I sighed and said, I lost trust in the bank after learning about your practice of judging clients based on education and work history. Are you panicking just because of what one person said? Do you have something to hide? And Larry, just because we're family doesn't mean you can skip paying rent. Pay your own rent. Kelly's dad shouted, because you went around stirring the pot, I got a bunch of complaints from my other clients. My boss chewed me out because of what you did. The nerve. Oh no, I didn't stir the pot. I just shared this story as casual conversation with my relatives and clients. I didn't tell them to close their accounts, I said with a smile. My son snapped at me, What clients, Dad? You're just a deadbeat, aren't you? Do you think a deadbeat could afford to build a huge house like this in such a prime location and still maintain this lifestyle? I even did some renovations recently, I replied. My son looked baffled and said, Huh? What's that? Did you go into debt or something? I'm really fed up with you. I took a break from my real estate job for a while and then switched to running an online business, which I'm still doing. How many times do I have to tell you I'm not a bum? I said. My son turned pale and said, What? I had no clue. I thought you were just working part-time. Kelly's dad started yelling, You're a real piece of work, keeping your occupation secret even from your own son. Annoyed, I said, Say whatever you want, and closed the front door. Outside, I heard them shouting, You've ruined my reputation. I'm gonna sue you. I can't believe I've been duped by my old man for this long. I'm not gonna let him do this to me. They were making a ruckus, but after about 5 minutes of shouting, they seemed to get exhausted and it got quiet. Once they realized that shouting was meaningless, I figured they wouldn't bother coming around here again. I let out a sigh of relief and went to make myself a cup of coffee. Just then, I heard my son's voice outside again. You big fat liar. What are you still doing here? I said as I looked out the window to see Kelly's dad and my son spray painting my front door. You've got to be kidding me. What are they up to now? Just as I was about to go outside and give them a piece of my mind, I heard a police siren getting closer. Could it be that someone in the neighborhood called the cops? My hunch was right. When I went outside, the 3 of them were being detained by the police, who had shown up because of a neighbor's complaint. There he is, that big fat liar. I lost all my credibility at work because of him, they shouted. The police calmly loaded them into the patrol car, saying, all right, we'll take it from here. Then one of the officers, who seemed to have just noticed me, approached with a strangely cheerful expression. Sir, would you please come with us to give your statement? Why me? I thought, but I guess I'm the victim here. I'm gonna spill the beans on all their shenanigans. When we got to the police station, I showed the cops a video from my phone. It was footage from the security camera I installed at my front door. The camera had recorded all the yelling and antics. "What a great piece of evidence," the officer exclaimed with a sparkle in his eye. And my questioning was over in a jiffy. My son and Kelly's dad were given a stern warning by the police and had to sign a restraining order to keep their distance from me. It turns out the whole neighborhood had witnessed their crazy behavior. One of my son's coworkers who lives nearby had been blabbering about it at the office. "Hey, you won't believe it, but Larry was caught spray painting his own father's house and got hauled off by the cops." I was so shocked I recorded the whole thing. My son became the talk of the town at his workplace and with clients, and his boss ended up demoting him. I went to report the incident to Bank of New York Mellon again, where Kelly's dad worked. When I showed the manager the security camera footage on my phone, his face turned white as a sheet. I heard that Kelly's dad finally got fired, and naturally, she called off the engagement with Larry. Larry and Kelly's family both fled far away to a rural area. Apparently, Kelly's parents even came to work part-time at the gas station in the sticks run by my brother. They were no good and couldn't get the hang of stocking shelves, no matter how many times they tried. I showed them and had to give them the boot right away. Word spread quickly, and nearby gas stations and farmers did the same. According to my brother, Kelly's parents can't seem to land a steady job and are bouncing from one gig to another at gas stations and farms. Furthermore, I heard that Kelly showered her boyfriends, including my son, with expensive gifts like watches, and she got into debt because of that. The little money her parents make from their part-time jobs apparently goes straight into paying off Kelly's debts. It's a mystery how they're making ends meet. It's been 6 years since then, and my son is now 30. It seems like he's changed for the better after being treated with kindness from folks in the small town he moved to. He came to me a couple of times and apologized sincerely. He said, "I was naive and immature. I didn't even try to understand your job and just labeled you as a good-for-nothing. I can't apologize enough for how much I regret it." Seeing the change in my son's attitude, I decided to let him move in with me. Now he's working at a company near my place, and little by little, he's helping me out with my work too. But don't get me wrong, he's still inexperienced, and I don't trust him completely. I'm hesitant to hand over all my work to him, but I'm going to observe his behavior and attitude towards work and make decisions accordingly. If he proves he's really turned his life around, I might consider handing over the reins of my business. But if I told him that, he might get too excited and say, "For real?" I'll hand in my 1 week's notice tomorrow and do something impulsive. I'm living with my son, holding on to the hope that one day I'll feel confident enough to trust him with everything. After the incident with the police, the news about Larry and Kelly's dad spread quickly. The neighborhood couldn't stop talking about it. One of Larry's coworkers, who lives nearby, blabbered about it at the office, saying, "Hey, you won't believe it, but Larry was caught spray painting his own father's house and got hauled off by the cops." I was so shocked I recorded the whole thing. Because of this, my son became the talk of the town at his workplace, and his boss ended up demoting him. I went to report the incident to Bank of New York Mellon again, where Kelly's dad worked. When I showed the manager the security camera footage on my phone, his face turned white as a sheet. He was speechless. I heard that Kelly's dad finally got fired, and naturally, she called off the engagement with Larry. Larry and Kelly's family both fled far away to a rural area. Apparently, Kelly's parents even came to work part-time at a gas station run by my brother. They were no good and couldn't get the hang of stocking shelves, no matter how many times they tried. My brother said they were a complete disaster, always messing up and causing trouble. Despite all this, my focus remained on my son. It's been a long road, but I believe he's starting to understand the importance of hard work and responsibility. He's apologized for his past behavior and seems genuinely remorseful. I've told him that actions speak louder than words, and I'm watching to see if his actions match his apologies. Living with him again has been challenging, but it's also been a chance for us to rebuild our relationship. I see glimpses of the man he could become, and it gives me hope. I haven't decided yet whether I'll hand over my business to him, but I'm giving him a chance to prove himself. If he shows he can be responsible and trustworthy, then maybe, just maybe, I'll consider it. But for now, I'm taking it 2 days at a time, hoping for the best and